Yeah, I think the answer is both. It's a massive opportunity for education, for providers, for employers to assist their employees to think in a long-term sense. I wanted to just back onto something Michelle has said because I think it's very relevant. You've got to think retirement as a concept has changed very much over the last 10, 15 years. In the old days, you used to work for 2 or 3 companies, you used to accrue your final salary benefit, you would retire at age 60 and off you'd go and theoretically play golf or whatever you're going to do for 15 years, so on. Retirement schemes were originally started when life expectancy post-retirement was 2 or 3 years. It was supposed to be something just in your old age to give you a couple of years of comfort. And now, of course, life expectancy is, 20 to 30 years post the age of 55, 60, when apparently we retire. What our studies have showed is people don't really retire as such. They want to maybe change their working habit, try a different vocation, maybe do something in the voluntary sector, maybe do some work around consultancy, come in and out of work. So the whole concept of a sort of off-the-cliff retirement has changed. So back to the question, do people, have they thought about, have they calculated in their heads the concept of retirement? Maybe that in some ways is outmoded. So on the one hand, is the education and the information available to employees to really understand what they're going to have, but also is it geared in such a way that takes account of the fact that the new model of retirement is completely different from the past, that it will involve work, it will involve periods of work, and it's not a cliff at 60.
Well, just to come back on that point, one of the issues of being an expat and living in this country or these countries is that to get a visa and be resident here after 60 is a big problem, and it's actually very rare. Does that play into the cliff idea in terms of the local reality?
I think it does. Certainly from an expat perspective, you need to access advice that looks at all kinds of different issues. So, for example, if you're accumulating cash benefits and wealth here in the UAE, what does that mean for you ultimately if you have to leave the country and go back to another place of residence, whether that's Europe or the USA or somewhere else in Asia? What's the tax implication of that? What does that mean? Most people are coming out of employment today with a pot of money. Do they know how to invest that? Do they know the tax implication of the kind of wrapper that you put that in? Do they understand the income tax or capital gains liability? They may have the inheritance tax situation, how to protect a family. All of these aspects are key, and it's quite a complex area. So getting access to good quality financial advice is vital around this piece.
I might go to you, Michelle. And a company like Alico MetLife on such a market as this, where we would, as Jeff indicated, it's both an opportunity and potentially a crisis. How does a company prepare for that and structure for such, if you take it as a massive opportunity, such a gaping gap?
Sure. Well, we've been in this part of the world for over 5 decades, so we've sort of seen this market evolve slowly but gradually. And some of the statistics that Tariq shared earlier. When he was talking about 1% of GDP, this was life and non-life. So if you consider that retirement falls on the life branch, you're looking at a much lower levels of penetration. I agree with what both Michelle and Jeff were saying. Awareness and education are absolutely key, and professional advice is a major factor here. Consider that people are living longer, which adds to the dimension of how serious an issue this is. Obviously the industry has a major role to play in terms of spreading that awareness, and again, that's best achieved by reaching as many people as possible and providing them with the type of advice that can prove useful in terms of initiating a plan that addresses their retirement needs. I think there's sort of a misunderstanding between what's investing and saving. I think people are you find people in this part of the world typically ready to invest, and that's sort of opportunistic. Whereas savings is more of a discipline. It's setting a certain amount aside on regular basis and having a plan that ensures that a certain financial objective is achieved whenever a person wishes to retire. So those are the kinds of things that
over that kind of length of period that you've been here, and still the statistics remain so low. That said, I mean, Jeff highlighted the fact that on a global level, retirement is changing, its structure is changing, people are living longer and all sorts of things. On a regional basis, do you identify that we are in some transition where that penetration is in a transformational moment now, or is it going to be still 5 decades, you said, another 5? I mean, how do you see that changing?
I think things are changing. I don't think they're changing as fast as we need them to be, or they should be, but certainly they're changing. And I think with economic growth and development, I think that's sort of a natural phenomenon. So we do see that happening. Obviously also with the introduction of products and services that cater to different needs. I mean, it was mentioned earlier that this is a transient population. A lot of people don't look at their presence in this market as being too long term. So portability in terms of retirement or savings plans is very important. If they were to move somewhere else or go back to their home countries, the number of years that they're required to set money aside. Again, there are some concerns about, well, my contract may only be for 3 years or 5 years, or the like. So there's different aspects that can address some real issues and real concerns. And I think the other factor in this part of the world is, and that's more cultural, is the fact that family is very important, and there's sort of a over-reliance on family of sorts. But that's also evolving and changing with time, and people are more prepared to take personal responsibility for their retirement plans and insurance needs as well.
On that point, Michelle, and you mentioned it yourself, family business and family. I think everywhere in the world we all consider families to be important, but probably less structured, or we don't depend on them as much as maybe we previously did. But in the title of the panel discussion, we added the "Who's covering me?" Retirement. Who's covering me? That part of the idea being that whether you're an employee of a multinational, you've been used to somebody taking care of that role, that structure, and on a local cultural level, as we've just highlighted, the family and so on. So the idea to think about, or the need to think about retirement is not there. Do you identify that changing, needs to change, where people have to get a little bit more self-dependent on preparing for their financial future in retirement, or even in 5 years' time?
Allow me to answer that question by actually separating 2 different populations. You have the expatriate population, all expatriate population, and the local indigenous population. And I will try to focus very specific on the Gulf rather than any other part, because at least this is my area of knowledge. If I take the expatriate population, most of them are educated, intelligent, have had a bit of knowledge about the issue of insurance and retirement. So that one becomes an easier subject for them to tackle and to understand. And then their only problem is trying to find out who's going to be a good provider or good supplier, and can it move from one part of the world to the other. That I think, if you allow me to make it to put it in a nutshell, I think is an easier subject to tackle. You come to the local population. They're talking about the life insurance. Insurance as overall is a very small percentage of the potential, very small. And life being, if you look internationally, life is by far greater than casualty and fire and normal general insurance. But that's not going to happen over here. And the simple reason, even though, I think the biggest Islamic life insurance, which is, what's it called? Takaful, which is Malaysia. Even they're talking like 5%. I don't see that going bigger. In this part of the world, forget it. And the simple reason that this is not going to happen is purely from the idea that we're looking at it forgive me.